wow, look at all these peeps. Wow. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm Charlie, and I'm co-facilitator of the Collab Salon here at Reauthoring Teaching, and I've been a licensed therapist for the past 20 plus years. I am also a cisgender white male, and as such, I'm someone who enjoys a significant amount of privilege, both in the world and in our counseling profession. And it is from this position of privilege that I've become acutely aware over the years of the dearth of Black clinicians within our field, and relatedly, the very tiny number of Black and POC students at Antioch University where I teach. And so both my business partner, Lucy Cotter, and I have made a concerted effort in the past few years to nurture and support these marginalized voices in our work at Narrative Counseling Center. And today I have the pleasure of being in conversation with three of these individuals and colleagues. Barbara Herring, known as B. She's on our board at Reauthoring Teaching, and also Tanya Barr and Eric Katende, both who are current associates at NCC. So welcome to all three of you. I'd like to start by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourselves.
I'm Tanya Barr, and I myself am queer, poly, sex positive. I'm just lit up by working with people through explorations, expansion, generativity, finding, seeking purpose, and ultimately connectivity to self and larger community.
My name is Barbara Herring. I go by B. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist out of LA, but now in Big Bear. I practice with all different types of communities, particularly marginalized communities. I say alternative loving communities. I'm just really excited to be here today and be part of this conversation.
Hello, I am Eric Katende. I am a proud Black person, and I'm a social justice advocate. I definitely see predominantly people of color of various intersecting identities. And yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to have this conversation because I think it's needed.
So the four of us had a very engaged conversation about 2 weeks ago in advance of today's salon. And so I'd like to start by asking what hopes, if any, that you have for our conversation today.
I definitely hope people can, just gain a better understanding of just in my opinion, the field of psychology and how much work there still needs to be done in terms of inclusivity, in terms of the Eurocentric nature of it all, in my humble opinion.
I'm hoping for, reconnecting with with the reality that Blackness is not a monolithic experience. Coming, at this point with like COVID, this idea of like returning to normal and like what that actually means for Black people, and that I don't know many Black people who want to return to the way things were before. So my hope is that in engaging this conversation, we're really collectively envisioning like new ways of being with one another.
I'm always interested and hopeful that people can walk away with some actually clear understandings in ways that potentially have been harmful and ways that we can be more helpful, particularly if you're in a privileged position with Black people in the room.
Thank you, B. Appreciate that. I have so many questions fighting for first position, so I'm just going to pick one. Your own experiences as people in therapy seeing a clinician, white, black, or otherwise. I'm curious, I think it might be very helpful to hear some of your experiences of what didn't work and perhaps what did.
I'm from, a suburb about 25 minutes outside of New York, and a predominantly white suburb. And, I definitely was one of few Black people in my school. And, there was definitely some things that occurred during that time that can make, looking different, be very difficult. So I went to this white male, and I was dealing with issues regarding racism. And that was something that was very difficult for me to express. Essentially, what his plan of action was, yeah, this is really tough, but you need to sort of just power through this. You need to just, kind of, white knuckle it and just get through it and it'll all be okay. And for me, that was completely invalidating of my experience. And it, it kind of just further exacerbated the issues I was already having. And what he did was something that I feel society does to Black people frequently. Gaslighting, a Black person's experience regarding racism. And that was a pretty, bad experience with that particular man. But then I also had a white clinician where he was very validating and he was mirroring me and he did make me feel safe.
Maybe I'll start with my validating experience. And I actually felt like loved and cared for by this white older clinician. And I can think of her now and I want to tear up at how present she was, how curious she was about my entire being. Now, my invalidating experience, it comes back to a lack of curiosity. I come from an immigrant background, and this other clinician collapsed all of my experience and did not hold for any curiosity. And I picked up something in a session that I just stopped and I was like, oh, you never asked, but that wasn't my economic situation. My family was actually very, like, they did well. But, oh, she had somehow conflated my Blackness with like maybe a mediated notion of what it was to be Black in that moment. I was like, oh, I've not been seen at all. I don't walk through the world like anyone else in this position of like, here I am, a Black woman entering the room. It's like, here I am, Tanya, who I find interesting, entering the room. Don't you want to know about her? Yeah. Like, I want to tell you. And it just felt like, I don't know if it was fear, a lack of curiosity, her being afraid to step into something, but yeah, it was really troubling. And that was how we ended.
Thanks, Tanya.
I want to say that I have a mixed experience too. I don't have a Black mother. So I want to say that because that is a different experience for different people, I went into therapy because my father had passed. Like literally, I wanted like grief counseling. And this person right away, they had read all the records before and everything, they do a pre-intake before you go in. And we started talking, and right away, this clinician said, well, it must be very difficult to be a homosexual. At that point, I was like, I don't refer to myself as such. That has nothing to do with the conversation. And I came in here for grief counseling about my father. When people don't listen, don't inquire, are not curious, or not inquisitive, and just make bold assumptions about who you are and why you are coming in to therapy, it was my first and last time with this clinician.
Thank you, B. This may be a couple of questions rolled into one. This phrase of, monolithic, right? I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experiences in terms of that, and also I'm curious about what the draw has been to narrative therapy for each of you. Like, why this model?
It's very harmful when we have this idea of Black people being a monolith, because we are expansive. We're everywhere. We have various interests. We have various thoughts. It's amazing how expansive and how limitless Black people are. And when people try to, pigeonhole us into a sort of category, it is very difficult to deal with. In regards to gravitating towards narrative, when I was in Antioch, I learned a lot about psychodynamic. I learned about Rogerian, and to be honest, I just wasn't interested. Didn't really speak to me. I didn't really feel particularly interested of what was saying, and I found it rather boring. And I was even questioning grad school, and I remember I took a narrative class, and it was the first time I've ever heard power differentials being discussed in a therapeutic context. And I felt seen for the first time. It was the theory that was least contaminated with Eurocentricity. I felt that it could speak to people like me. And I like the fact that you were doing therapy from a place of curiosity rather than ego. I've seen too many therapists that I've worked with in my own personal life who have different things, and they tend to think, oh, I know, and they don't. As we always say in narrative circles, like, the client is the expert on their life.
Thank you, Eric.
The questioning the monolithic experience of Blackness has been something that has been ever present in my life. I was a young punk rock weirdo, like largely marginalized in Florida as someone that people just could not figure out, even, marginalized experiences within my family of like who is this Black person and why? And I too, Eric, knew from a very young age, I was like, yeah, but I'm Black. Like, everything I do is Black. Like, listening to really loud punk political music was my Black experience. When the richness of like the Black experience gets collapsed, erased, it feels often like lazy, uncurious. I think maybe narrative came in right around the same time that I'd watched a documentary on the ways in which psychology had been utilized in a colonizing fashion. And for me too, Eric, that became a huge crisis of like, what am I getting involved with? To sit in a therapeutic space where I talk to an individual as if I need for you to somehow be okay with the ways in which you've been oppressed, all the ways in which you've been oppressed, and I want to somehow make you okay and fall in line with that for like psychological wellness, is like this is not the work that I wish to be doing. So finding narrative just felt like, and we're back. Oh, and this is the work. This is the work. Calling into question, calling into the room, like all that wishes to remain silent and unexamined, and all the ways in which you've been told that you are less than, you are smaller than, you cannot challenge. and realizing what this does to the spirit and the will and the energy of an individual, it just felt like, oh my, like, I'm so happy to be in this space of like, this is the work that I can do. And this is the work that I feel like I can probably do for the rest of my life. So yeah, it resonated basically deeply.
Beautiful. Thank you, Tanya.
As far as narrative, queer counseling and narrative practice, that was the first narrative class. And it was when I was in that class that I was like, okay, this is the type of therapy that I need to practice. All the other ones were, it was just so limiting and medicalized and, you know, came with so many assumptions about the people that were in front of you. I just feel like any marginalized people, we have to be able to deconstruct what is around them and all the from the micro to the macro level, family, community, government, just all the different various ways in which we walk through the world.
And the ways in which we pay attention to detail. And I say to students all the time, the answers are in the details. This part of the conversation is reminding me of something that emerged when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it was identified as the gaze. That's G-A-Z-E, the gaze of white folks, if you will. That was very instructive to me, and I was wondering if there's anything you care to share about your relationship to the gaze, or like what has been most helpful to you in navigating that.
I don't know the experience of another, but I can tell you the experience of me is often of me watching the ways in which I am being observed in the world. Am I to this? Am I not enough this? Like, am I safe in this environment? Oh, this is a very white space. Which ways will I be ignored? Which ways will I be pulled out as like some exotic like thing to like, it's a continuous, like exhausting way of being in the world. And, you know, what I have received, I think, from this community, I didn't feel like, oh, here's my Blackness that they're interested in, or what have you. It's like, it just felt like, oh, it's an interest in me. I think, you know, with narrative, I just appreciate all of the ways in which people want to break shit up. And it just feels like there is definitely like a punk rebellion that sits at the core of it, and that I'm not okay with the status quo. I'm not okay with what is being dictated.
Cool. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I'm thinking about the BLM movement, and particularly in response to George Floyd's murder, how it's kind of exploded our cultural discourse over the past year. I'm wondering if there's anything in that context you care to share, particularly in terms of what you see as hopeful and possible that maybe wasn't so hopeful and possible before.
The 2020 Black Lives Matter, that whole movement, I think it was very powerful. It was emotional seeing the amount of support that people were giving, and I was able to see people are having more complicated and difficult conversations about race. I hope we get more in depth with it. I'm cis, I'm straight, I'm a Black man, and I do think, you know, Black Lives Matter a lot of it is centering around people who are like me and hold my identities. I like to at least help think that I can use my privilege identities to help sort of, I guess, sway that conversation more in that other direction with the other marginalized identities. Because the first thing to, create change is to admit that there's something that needs to be changed. I just also hope that this Black Lives Matter movement, this wave, is not a trend. This is our lives. Like, this is my life. There's no trend for me here. This is something I experience.
Right.
What happened to George Floyd, unfortunately, happens all the time, daily, all the time. And it had to be this bad, and everybody had to be inside to watch and witness. And like the movement, it's that thing of, I only feel like the movement got as big as it did because we were all in a pandemic too. So I think my hope is that this is like not just talk, this is behavior modification. So it's about commitment to seeing, speaking, and doing. I just hope it doesn't wane.
The hope is that we do not settle for a position of returning back to normal. After the Chauvin trial, I was buoyed in seeing some, reports in media with like inquiries into the FBI and inquiries into like white supremacist organizations infiltrating, which has felt like a conspiracy theory amongst Black people for like decades. I remember being at Antioch talking about the roots of policing and how that was tied to slave patrols. And I had a room full of people who looked at me like I had 3 heads, and who had never heard of this, who'd never known about this. And I was like, how do I only hold this information? But now with, Black Lives Matter, like, it feels like there's an emerging knowledge or like wanting to know. So my hope is that we continue to not only want to know, but to unlearn and to put the new knowledge and the unlearned knowledge into action.
Do you have any thoughts about how our showing up differently could be helpful and supportive to you?
I'm a Black man. That's something that's very important to me, but it's not everything about me. There's a lot of layers to Eric. Being Black is one of them, but it's everything. I'm a firm believer that, anyone who has any marginalized identity or understands that experience, their brain is brilliant. Their brain is absolutely brilliant, because the amount of synapses you're firing in your brain to assess for safety. When I go into a white space, I'm always assessing, okay, how am I going to say this to this person? How am I going to talk? Am I going to code switch this? Just because you see, a Black man with tattoos who looks a certain way, and maybe I'm wearing a hat or whatever, don't make any assumptions. And that also goes to your clients, lead with curiosity, and I think that is the best way you can support, by amplifying the voices and listening, just listening.
Charlie, can I say something just real quick?
Please do. Please do.
Eric, no, yeah, like curiosity and leave space for our joy. We have a lot of pain, and leave space for our joy. We are not just our pain stories. So just that.
Thank you for that, B. Beautiful. Tanya, did you want to add anything? And it's fine if not.
I'm just beaming over here, I think. Yeah, that was beautifully said by both Eric and Dee. And that, the Black experience is a joyful experience. Like,
Yeah.
Really is.
we've created a lot of dope culture. Like, we are a resilient people. We have deep reservoirs of joy and excitement and energy. And yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it is not just a pain story. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is deeply
Yeah.
resilient. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Before I hand it back to Peggy, I just want to say, while it is the four of us here, thank you so much for inviting me and all of us into your joy and into your lived experience. I can only imagine the ways in which today's conversation will continue to reverberate in reflective and hopefully active ways for everyone who's been a part of the conversation. Thank you. Okie doke. How about a big two-handed wave to Tanya, Eric, and B, and thank you. Have a good week. We'll see you next month, everybody. Bye.